you here sooner. Unfortunately, it's just me and you here today. Brandon couldn't make it. He had some car problems, and he said it's just going to be me and you. But I figure we'll have a lot to talk about and get through. And, you know, one of the things I wanted to start off with is, would you tell us your story? Because, you know, just in case people don't know who you are.
Yeah, my story is pretty simple. I was born in Murray County. My dad worked for Stauffer Chemical Company there, and we lived in Columbia until second grade, and then we moved to Mount Pleasant so he'd be closer to work. That's where I went to all the rest of the way through school. Really, nobody in my family had been to college. I had no plans to go to college, so I was just going to get a factory job like everybody else I knew. And they were just starting to build the Saturn plant. And when I graduated, my uncle, as a graduation gift, he paid for my union card for the laborers union, so I could work out at the new Saturn plant where they were building it. Of course, it was a union job.
Right.
So I went to work out there with my brother. I have a twin brother. We don't look like it. But we went to work out there, and I can tell you it only took about 2 months of operating a shovel for 12 hours a day in 95-degree 100 weather with 100% humidity for me to start thinking I might want to do something different with my life. So actually, after we worked for that job finished and we got laid off, I drove to the high school, walked into the guidance counselor's office and said, "How do I get into college?" And she told me, gave me a couple of instructions. So I knew a lot of people that had gone to MTSU, so I applied there. I took the ACT test, got in, and you know, if you don't believe, you know, God has a plan for everybody, my life will convince you of that, or it convinced me of it, because went through college at MTSU, studied criminal justice. Wasn't really looking to be an attorney, was interested more in law enforcement. But I didn't want to be a beat cop, I didn't want to be a patrol officer.
Yeah.
I thought I could just go right into being an investigator or detective. And a lot of people think that, when they go to college. And actually applied for the TBI, got turned down. And I was dating a girl at the time. She got accepted to UT Law School in Knoxville, and I got rejected everywhere I applied. So we moved to Knoxville, and she went to law school over there. She ended up getting a job in Nashville, so we moved back to Middle Tennessee. We're living in Nashville, and I was working as a state probation officer at the time. And I thought, I want to do something different. I'm going to apply to Nashville School of Law, and if that doesn't pan out, then I may go get certified to teach high school. And where they rejected me 3 years prior, Nashville accepted me then, and
thank God.
Yeah, so I went to law school, and right after I finished law school, and I was actually waiting for the bar results for my bar exam. My mother called me, and she grew up in Mount Pleasant, and at the time, the DA's investigator, one of his investigators, was Tommy Workman, and he had gone to school with my mother. And just so happened that the DA at the time, Mike Bottoms, had gotten a grant for a drug prosecutor, and they were looking for somebody to possibly take that job. And my mom called me and said, "Hey, Mike Bottoms wants to talk to you." So I called, and he told me about this job, and I came and interviewed, and it was a grant for 3 years as a drug prosecutor, felony drug prosecutor. And when he interviewed me, he offered me the job, and he just asked me to promise that I would stay at least for the 3 years of the grant. And I agreed to do so, honestly not knowing that if I would stay that long, because I had already decided it would be. I knew it was a good opportunity to get trial experience,
right?
But I intended to use that experience to go out on my own and make lots of money, litigating either civil plaintiff's work or maybe even criminal defense work, but I was going to make a lot of money.
Yeah, you ever want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's how it's always worked out for me.
Yeah.
I have my plans all set, and then God starts laughing and goes, "No, I got different plans for you."
Exactly. And, by the time the grant was up 3 years later, I knew being a prosecutor is what I wanted to do, and that's how I wanted to spend my career as an attorney. And fortunately, at the same time, a position came open on the DA's staff for just a regular state-paid position for a prosecutor. So I was able to move out from under that grant into a state position, so I didn't have to worry about the grant running out or anything like that. And I continued for the next 11 years. I continued prosecuting all of the felony drug cases in Murray County, and then odd and end other cases. I tried 5 murder cases during that time. I enjoyed prosecuting the drug cases, but I wanted to branch out and do other things too. So I prosecuted rape cases and murder cases and other things while I was the drug prosecutor. But all of that gave me the experience, and then. And I know I'm taking way too long to answer this question.
No.
But then, I found out that Mike Bottoms was going to retire. So I'd never been interested in running for office. Never thought about running for office. Didn't consider myself any kind of politician. And but I knew that. And I was perfectly fine to stay on at the DA's office as an assistant DA,
right?
As long as I worked for a DA that I could work for and respect, and all that required was somebody who was wanting to prosecute criminals, hold people accountable, and had the experience to do the job. So I started asking around, and all the attorneys that had either talked about running for DA before or had run in the past, they all told me that they were not going to run. And then I found out that there was a young guy that had only been practicing law for 2 or 3 years at that time, that he was going to run.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like I would be able to work for somebody that at that time had zero experience in the courtroom.
Are you talking about Chaz Mulder?
Yeah.
The mayor of...
the now mayor of Columbia. And, I didn't know him, didn't really know anything about him, but I knew he didn't have any courtroom experience, and I didn't think I could work for a boss that didn't understand the job we were doing. So.
Well, I tell you what is amazing is I remember when you ran in 2014, I just really started getting involved in politics a couple of years ago, but I remember meeting you in 2014, and some of the people that I knew that knew you were saying, how good of a person you were. And what surprises me, now looking back, because I didn't know these things then like I do now, but Mike Bottoms, he actually supported you on running, did he not?
To some extent, yeah. But Mike was really distracted. His son was running for sessions judge at the time also.
Okay.
So he was 99.9% of Mike's attention was of course
for his son,
helping his son try to get elected as judge.
But I also know that he didn't discourage you either.
No, he was the one that he told me he was the one that planted the seed and said, hey, would you want to run because I'm going to retire?
Well, and that's my whole thing, because now knowing Mike's pretty staunch Democrat,
oh, yeah.
and you are a very staunch conservative. Mm-hmm. And most people, they may not realize that about you, but you're extremely conservative, and kind of taking us, to something new here. I noticed that you've stood up for Jason Aldean and his song, and you've been very vocal about it.
Yeah, and you know that, and let me back up just a little bit
Yeah.
too, and I think that goes into, you know, Mike knew I was conservative, and I knew Mike was a Democrat, but if you're doing the job of DA right, it doesn't matter what party you are.
That's correct, and that's
you know, because when I'm in the office as DA, when I'm looking at cases, and this is what I've told a lot of people, I've never looked at a file on a particular case or a particular crime and asked the defense attorney, well, before I make an offer, what is your guy, Democrat or Republican? I've never done that.
right. No,
Just like I've never said, is your client white or black? You
right.
know, all that's irrelevant.
It is. It's absolutely irrelevant, but that's why you know I'm trying to point out.
Yeah.
You know, maybe I didn't make it. You know, Nolan, I'm glad you said this. Is that we had somebody that was the attorney, district attorney, and he knew you. I mean, he knew who you were, and yet he felt like you would do a good enough job, even though you had totally different, opposite views politically.
Right. Politically, yes. But then, you know, when I'm DA, you know, I don't let politics affect how I do my job when I prosecute.
Right.
But I do have strong feelings about certain things, but I think a lot of those things align perfectly with the role of the DA, like the Jason Aldean thing. The courthouse in Murray County, that was the big controversy, is the location of the video, because almost 100 years ago there was a lynching there.
Right.
Well, to me that was an asinine argument, because how many? I guarantee you, zero of the people that were raising that as a big deal knew before they were told that there was a lynching there 100 years ago, and that's what I put in my post is, you know, a lot of small towns have periods in their past they're not proud of,
Right.
and you shouldn't forget those, but you can't stay stuck there either.
It's a victim mentality is what it is.
And in that same courthouse that's now famous for a lynching 100 years ago, I saw on Facebook today where Stacey O'Donnell, an attorney here in Lawrenceburg, represented a family that adopted a young black girl in that same courthouse. A white family adopted a young black girl in that courthouse. And I hope nobody in that courtroom thought, well, that's inappropriate because somebody was lynched on this square 100 years ago. That's how ridiculous that whole argument is. And then the other side of that argument is that the video is somehow racist. The only thing that was shown in that video were acts of lawlessness and violence.
As a matter of fact, I've watched a video a couple of different times, even though I don't really listen to country music. And from what I've seen, the main perpetrators that they even showed in the video were actually white.
They were. And I don't care if you're white, black,
Doesn't matter.
Brown, purple, whatever. If you spit in a cop's face in Murray County or Lawrence County or Giles or Wayne, in my district, I'm going to hold you accountable. And
Good.
I'm going to hope they take you to jail immediately.
Right.
And I'm going to do my best to make an example out of it. You stomp on a patrol car, vandalize that car, you're going to wish you hadn't done it.
That's right.
And we're going to make you pay for those actions using the laws that are on the books.
Right.
Vandalizing property, burning buildings, all the things that these people were allowed to do in other cities, you're not going to be allowed to do that here. And it's that simple. Our law enforcement won't let you do it, and I'm going to back them up.
Right, and we got the judges too that will work within the law to make sure that the law is applied.
Right, and you know, deterrence is a big part of the criminal justice system. And if you don't, well, the one reason you saw those activities going on over and over and over for long periods of time in all these cities is because nobody was held accountable.
That was my next question. Do you see that unfortunately, in the big cities, it's like the big cities have become modern day Sodom and Gomorrah.
Oh, yeah.
And because those police are scared to do their job, it seems like, because we have DAs that will not apply the law, or judges that will not allow, if they are being prosecuted, will let them go.
Yeah, exactly. And whether it was intentional that the left decided to seize the big cities, it probably was. It makes sense for voting purposes. If you control the big cities, you control a lot more votes.
Correct.
Automatically. But yeah, the crime, there's going to be crime in any town or any city of any size. But the level of crime is going to be based on whether or not there's a deterrence to committing crime. And that boils down to, are you held responsible if you commit a crime?
Right.
And I can't imagine being a DA and turning a blind eye to crime. And I was in Nashville just a couple of weeks ago, and walking up the sidewalk, and there's 3 guys standing on the corner smoking dope.
Right in front of you.
Yeah, I smelled it way before I got there, and people just walking around them and walking by them, and there were cops nearby, but they weren't right there.
And that's got to be frustrating for you, because here you are upholding the law, but because you're not in your district or anything, you really can't do anything about it.
Yeah, of course I did. I just walked on by like everybody else, but and I didn't go and call a police officer over there and say, "Hey, these guys are smoking dope," because I know what they would do. At most,
nothing.
At most, they might give them a ticket or something. But you do that here. If an officer in my district pulls you over and they smell and a cloud of marijuana rolls out of your car, they're going to search your car.
Right.
Because that gives them probable cause that you have marijuana in your car, which is illegal still.
Absolutely, and it should be. Illegal. Yes.
It may not be for very much longer, but it still is. But if you're riding down the road smoking marijuana here, you better hope you're not committing any other crimes, because that marijuana smell is going to lead to those officers stopping you, possibly searching you, and finding whatever else you have in it.
You're at the very least going to be driving under the influence at that point.
Could be, and you're going to be charged with possession of the marijuana.
Right. And it's so interesting watching what is happening even here in Tennessee with the marijuana. Me and you attended an event, about 4 or 6 months ago? Where they were talking about the dangers of marijuana and the THC in particular. And that impressed me, that this was an event that wasn't on most people's radar, but yet you were there wanting to find out and learn and understand what is happening and what has happened, because it was a guy talking about how bad Colorado became once legalized marijuana happened.
Right, and that was the one reason I wanted to go to that, is because I knew from the advertisement I saw that this guy was going to talk about the effects of legalization in Colorado.
Right.
And I've read about it, and I know I have my opinions about legalization and whether it's a good or bad thing. And I wanted to hear his perspective, and he just confirmed what I assumed is there's no. You hear all the time, well, marijuana is harmless, and I will readily admit marijuana is not as serious as
other drugs,
as methamphetamine, or crack cocaine, or fentanyl. It's not going to immediately cause the damage to your life that those drugs do and can.
Right.
And I know it's a plant, and I know that it grows naturally and all that. But that's the one thing that I learned from his presentation is they had no idea, and what he said was, we didn't know what we were doing when we legalize this. When we legalize marijuana, we're thinking about legalizing the pot that people
Yeah,
smoke.
Cheech and Chong is who he used.
Yeah, he said we think we're legalizing a couple of guys smoking a joint together and making that legal.
Right.
There's no harm in that really. But what they didn't know was there's a whole industry out there waiting at the state line of every state that hasn't legalized it yet. And they take that legal marijuana, when you create that crack in the law, then they introduce all these other products that are now legal.
Right.
And those products are hundreds of times more powerful, especially psychologically. I mean,
Right.
people, the emergency room admissions shoot up in all these places that's legalized, and it's because these drugs are so potent. They're causing reactions in people. They think they're going to get high on marijuana, and they end up thinking they're going to die because they're hallucinating so bad.
Right.
Or in the case he talked about, where the guy was hallucinating and dove off a balcony. A young guy that had brilliant life ahead of him, dove off a balcony due to the hallucinations he was having from eating these gummies. Or the other guy that was a model student and a wonderful athlete, and he starts taking these highly potent THC drugs and ends up committing suicide because his mind is so messed up after taking them.
See, and that's what I noticed, because, I brought my girls with me because I wanted to learn about it, because, truthfully, I always had looked at it as being harmless. But you're also talking to somebody, I've never even seen a marijuana joint.
Mm-hmm.
Me, I would have no interest in marijuana because I always heard that it makes you hungry, and the last thing I need to be is more hungry and eat more. I don't need to be eating more.
Don't need
so
I don't have any problems with the appetite.
Yeah, I have no problems with my appetite. But it was an eye-opener for me, because I always looked at it as kind of being harmless, but I never wanted to go down that road. I never believed in it. And I wanted my children to maybe learn, but I wound up learning a lot, because now I don't view it as harmless anymore.
Right.
From what I've seen. And it destroys. What really got my attention was when you're under the age of 25, it affects the human brain so much that they can never, ever get over what they have done.
And the other argument you hear for legalizing it is that that it's harmless, and that it calms people down. People that smoke marijuana are not violent. Well, I can tell you from my experience as a prosecutor, that's not true either.
Really?
I've seen. Well, there's a young man in Murray County who is paralyzed from the neck down, and will be for the rest of his life, because his buddy thought he stole his bag of weed. And his buddy walked up to him and walked up to his car and shot him, trying to kill him.
Yeah, buddy, friend.
Yeah. And it was all over a bag of marijuana. And shot this guy's paralyzed for the rest of his life. I dealt a lot with gang violence as the drug prosecutor in Murray County. One of the cases that I prosecuted was the Papa John's murder and robbery in Columbia. I don't know if you remember that. It was
yeah, I do vaguely.
A young man working at Papa John's, had his whole life ahead of him, doing the right thing, and these two thugs come in and rob him. Well, one of the guys, when he sees that, we're not just going to take the money and run, he does run out of the store. Well, the other guy, so that he could build credibility with the gang, decided he was going to kill the clerk.
I remember that even more now.
Gordon Schaefer was the young man's name who lost his life that night. And this guy murdered him in cold blood so he could gain credibility to join the gang. But that's not the point I'm getting to. You know what the man, the young guy, he was 17 at the time.
Kid.
Yeah.
I mean, literally a kid.
Well, the shooter was 17.
Yeah.
The victim was 19.
Yeah.
The man, you know what the murderer spent his days doing every day?
Marijuana.
Smoking blunts and playing Xbox.
Probably playing violent video games.
Video games.
Yes.
And smoking blunts all day long.
Yeah.
That's what he did all day before that.
Yeah.
Before he killed Gordon Schaefer.
He had no sense of reality.
So marijuana does not turn you into some peace-loving hippie like we all picture from the 70s.
Right, yeah, Cheech and Chong.
Right. The marijuana of today does not do that, especially not, and I'm no psychologist, but when you couple chronic drug use with an alternate reality that you're involved in all day long where you're shooting people on a screen, it desensitizes you to violence.
It absolutely does, and I'm so glad you're bringing this up, Brent. We you know, I never even thought we would get on this subject, but this is so important for our listeners to understand this.
And one of the things I'll never forget about that trial, about that case, and it just shows you how cold and calculate, just how cold and how desensitized the shooter was. And I'm looking at the crime scene pictures, and I noticed there's change all over the floor behind the cash register, between the cash register and the safe. And I thought it was strange that all this change was on the floor, but I didn't really think that much about it. You know, when you're prepping for trial, I was focused more on, you know, the shooting that was on video. And the reason, well, I won't say this is the reason he shot him. I already told you the reason he killed Gordon.
Yeah.
But the reason he used that night was because when Gordon told him that the safe was on a timer and that he couldn't open the safe, that's when he shot him.
Yeah.
But he had already made Gordon empty the cash registers. And I couldn't figure out why all this change was on the floor until I watched the video for about the fifth or sixth time. And Mr. Fitzpatrick, the shooter, he wasn't happy with just the, you know, and it's clear from the video, Gordon was terrified.
Yeah.
From the moment those guys walked in, he's scared out of his mind.
This case really has affected you for even, you even
was,
remember their names.
It was an
even.
eye-opening case for me.
I mean, that was what, 7, 8 years ago? 9?
At least. No, it was, the jury trial was before I was elected, so
yeah,
that was in probably 13.
Yeah, so we're 10 years now.
10 years out. But the thing I'll never forget about that case is when I figured out how all that change got on the floor. And it was because the shooter told him, I want the change too. And Gordon takes a manila envelope, one of those, it's probably 5.5 by 7 or something like that. So,
yeah.
And he pushes it open, and he's trying to put the change, trying to take the change out of the change drawer and drop it in that envelope. And he's shaking so bad, he can't hit the envelope.
And they say marijuana is...
Mm-hmm. And this guy stood there watching that. And
I can tell it's affecting. You telling the story is affecting me.
Yeah.
I mean, people on the radio may not hear it, but I think they'll see it, if they go and watch the YouTube or Facebook.
It's infuriating.
But you know what? That's why we're lucky to have you. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to tell you, because you're showing raw emotions right now. I mean, the story's even affecting me because, I got a son that's 21 years old. And that would just infuriate me. And I got twin daughters that are 12. And to think that something like that happens, even in a small town, but yet we're going to talk about Jason Aldean. Saying we don't put up with that around here.
And that was the message of that song: is don't bring that to a small town.
That's right. Because
we're not going to just let it happen like they do in the big cities.
That's right.
And I actually have a role to play in whether or not we put up with that.
Yeah.
And that's why I posted about it.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be clear that as the DA and the so-called chief law enforcement official in these counties,
Yeah.
I wanted to be on record that we won't stand for lawlessness and violence.
Yeah.
You can come here and protest. You won't find a bigger defender of the Constitution than me.
Right.
And I don't care, what kind of issue you want to protest. If you want to celebrate some issue I disagree with, I may not agree with your position on that, but I'll die for your right to be able to publicly display your position and announce your position and celebrate peacefully, as long as you peacefully gather and assemble, which is what our Constitution says.
Right.
You have the right to peaceful assembly.
Peaceful assembly. Right.
I will never oppose that.
Right.
But the minute you think you can come in and wreak havoc and basically produce anarchy, that's where you're going to find out you're wrong.
Well, and I tell you what, we're very lucky. We have you. We also have some good judges. I mean, I know two of them fairly well, Caleb Bayless and Judge Chris Sockwell. Know them pretty well. I mean, know them well enough. I got their phone numbers, even, and
both
call
good
them.
men.
They're both good men. And I know we got a great sheriff here, in John Myers. I think the world of John and the things and to see how our area has so much less problems than some of the other areas that I see is a testament to it.
And, we have problems.
We do, but I mean not as big as problems. I'm not afraid to go to Walmart even at 10 o'clock at night. I'm not afraid to do that. But if I go to Nashville or Murfreesboro or Memphis, that's a little bit different story. I'm not going to want to be out after dark in those areas. And I think that's because we feel safe. Here. And that gets down, you talk about the Constitution. I want to go back and talk to you about this, about the lockdowns and mandates with COVID. And the reason I want to bring this up is I don't see this as over. I see that these things can happen again. How serious did it get for you? Did you ever have anything come up where they were trying to take these mandates and try to turn it into where people were actually going to have to be prosecuted over a mandate? And your views on that?
Well, I fielded a lot of phone calls from most of the law enforcement agencies in this district about that.
Okay.
And they were looking to me for guidance. And of course, hindsight's 2020, but you go back to that time in 2020.
Right.
You want to believe that the officials that are making those calls are making it from a position of knowledge and information, and you want to trust that they're right. That if we do these things, it'll stop this pandemic. So, in that frame of mind, my instruction to all the agencies was: if you see a violation of these mandates, then warn them. Just advise the person they're in violation.
Right.
Do not arrest.
Right.
And of course, the follow-up question is, well, what if we warn them and they basically tell us to go fly a kite?
Right.
And my position, my response was, that happens, call me, and we'll talk about it.
Right.
And we'll handle those case by case.
According if they're respectful or not.
Right.
It.
And this was early on in the situation. Well, then, when the executive orders came down from the governor, there were a handful of us elected DAs that we actually publicly voiced our opposition.
Right, I remember that.
And that's, like I said, I never was a politician before I became DA, but I learned a lot about politics through that.
Right.
And I learned that, you make the powers that be mad, then they don't forget it.
Right. Right.
And I'm not going to elaborate on that, but, years after the fact, or, long after, that situation's over with, it was clear that the powers that be hadn't forgotten about, the fact that some of us DAs had voiced our opinion against those things.
But you know what? Your people that you represent here, I think we did take notice, because when you ran in 2022, you ran unopposed.
Yeah, I did, thankfully.
But I think it's because of making decisions like that, Brent, putting our constitutional rights ahead of a edict or a mandate.
Right. And I think that when our legislature passed the laws pertaining to emergency situations like that, I think they had the best intentions.
Yeah, because they didn't know.
Right. But I can tell you from after seeing it in effect, and if I'd been DA at the time, I probably would have said, yeah, that makes sense. Let's pass that. But the law as we have it now on the book says if the governor issues a
executive order
under the emergency powers. In other words,
Right.
it has to be a crisis situation, but that could be anything from tornadoes to pandemics.
Right.
Our law says that once those emergency powers are enacted, and our governor starts issuing executive orders, then those executive orders, a violation of that order carries up to a year in jail. Sure does. It's a Class A misdemeanor if you violate a lawful executive order under the emergency powers.
The emergency powers. Well, we need to
Right.
talk to our legislatures about
Right.
that. That gives too much power to one man.
Right. Well, and then you have a situation where that man delegated that authority to all the county mayors.
Right.
Well, then now you've got 95 people who have that power.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And we were lucky that we had T.R.
Yeah,
Williams.
we were very lucky.
That was God fearing first.
Right.
And it's like, no, I'm going to let you make that decision. Same with Andy Oogles over in Murray County.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, it probably got him elected to Congress.
Yeah.
To be honest
Well,
with you.
I think it did. I mean, of course, Andy's he's a savvy politician. And
He is.
He didn't let that situation go to waste, and he.
But it'd been so easy to cave because he was under a lot of pressure.
He was.
I mean, the national media went after him.
Yeah. And locally he was.
Chaz Mulder being one of them, maybe.
Just crucified.
One of the guys. He's been wrong on just about everything, hasn't he?
Well, we won't comment about that.
Well,
But,
you can't, but I can. I mean, I'm here. I want people to know about you, but I'm going to call out when I see things making bad decisions. I'll put it to you this way. I'm very personable. It hit me very personally with COVID. I had 60% of my family, and I'm going to say it, killed within a 3-month period of time over COVID. And if I had went to the hospital like my 3 family members did, I would be dead too, because of how it was treated. But it all comes down to this, the Democrats on one side, and we are the Republican Party, and I know that you are representing everybody. But here's the thing: what happened to my body, my choice?
Yeah.
What happened if the mask worked and you want to wear a mask? Why should I have to wear a mask? Because yours worked, doesn't it?
Right.
So
and sad. I mean, I don't know if you've read it or not, but somebody gave me Robert F. Kennedy's book, true.
Yeah.
It's called The Real Anthony Fauci or something.
That's correct. Yes.
And that book, and he backs up. I mean, it's not just allegations and assertions made by Kennedy. I mean, he backs it up
with science,
and footnotes, and he can cite the studies and everything. But you read that book, and it's absolutely. I had to stop. I never finished the book.
Right.
Because I do my reading when I go to bed at night.
Uh-huh.
You know, and I read a lot of history and biographies and stuff like that. And I was actually out of things to read. I didn't have any books to read, and I'd had that book for months. And I thought, well, I'm going to start reading this. And I made it probably 2/3 of the way through the book. And I had to stop reading it because I was losing sleep. I couldn't put that book down and go to sleep. I was too mad.
Hey, listen.
And,
it, like I said, is very, very personal to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you believe what's in that book, then hundreds of thousands of Americans died.
Unnecessary. I would say millions.
Well, yeah, millions, solely so these vaccines could be rolled out.
You know, I'm glad you're saying that because I always tell people that the vaccine wasn't made for COVID. Mm-hmm. COVID was made for the vaccine.
Yeah, well, and that's another thing you'll learn in this book is COVID wasn't a new thing.
No,
and the vaccines weren't.
Coronaviruses have been around forever.
This mRNA, the vaccines, that,
yes,
they rolled out something.
Robert Malone.
They've been around since
the 90s.
The 90s.
Yeah, Robert Malone was the pioneer of that.
But I believe this. The main point of the book makes is you can't get emergency use authorization for these vaccines if there's a viable alternative treatment.
Correct.
And that's why
ivermectin. I was going to whisper it in the mic, but thank you for saying it, Brent.
That's why hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin were villainized.
That's correct.
And that's why doctors were ordered not to treat people with those drugs. And
Joey Hensley didn't listen to that.
Good. And I know there were a few doctors and pharmacists out there that ignored that.
Matt Niswonger, who's a nurse practitioner. I think those were the only two really in this area that would give it. Me, I went and got the horse one. I went and got the horse pace. Yeah. But it was after the fact. When I had COVID. This was before we knew all these things.
Right.
But I'll tell you my biggest thing on the vaccine. If anybody would have took the vaccine, Brent, it would have been me because I was deathly sick. My O2 for 10 straight days, I never even saw 85.
Oh, wow.
I didn't leave my bedroom for 17 days. I couldn't. I physically couldn't because I couldn't get enough breath. But this is what when I seen the vaccine, I would have took it. My dad died, my uncle died, my first cousin died. They all went in the hospital. They all came out in a pine box.
Yeah.
I would have took it in a heartbeat, but then they started saying, well, if you don't take it, you can't go to the store. If you don't take it, you can't go to work.
Yeah.
Now, I want to prerequisite what I'm about to say. The vaccine is not the mark of the beast, but Revelations 13:17, it's very plain. It says, no man, rich or poor, free or slave, can buy or sell without the mark or his number or his name. Those with understanding knows the number is 666. So I say all that to say this. I know it's not the mark of the beast because we don't have the beast yet, but it's a precursor, and it's getting people in line to take that mark when it does happen.
And the fact that our media and our government can do what they did, whether knowingly or not, so that these pharmaceutical companies could get their vaccines out there, is terrifying. And it's about as terrifying as what's going on with the Department of Justice right now.
It is, and I got that on there with what's going on with our DOJ, our FBI. What do you think about this mess that we're seeing with our federal government and really taking away rights every day from the American citizens?
It's concerning. I've worked, as a prosecutor for over 20 years. I've worked side by side with federal agencies and federal prosecutors, and most of those they're in it for the same reason I am.
Right.
Most of those men and women are doing it because they believe in law and order and upholding justice. But it's clear that the leaders of those agencies they're not in it for that reason. They're in it for politics. They're in it to protect their party and their side of the aisle and their position, and they're willing to. I remember when the hearings were being held about Hillary's email server.
Right. Yeah, 33,000 emails.
Yeah, and I mean, people testified. Well, what did you do with after we subpoenaed your emails and your Blackberries and your phones? What did you do with those? We smashed them with hammers. We smashed the phones with hammers, and then testimony of live witnesses. I was hired to come in and administer this program to wipe this server. The name of the program is called BleachBit. And what it does is it erases data from hard drives and servers so that it cannot be recovered.
What would have happened to me or you if we'd have done that?
We'd be serving at least life in prison because, if you take what's going on now,
yeah,
you could stretch that all the way into treason.
Yes, sir. That's because that's what I think. You're saying it, that what I've always thought. Yeah. And people, you're hearing this on the radio with our DA, Brent Cooper.
I'm just, number one, I'm just an American citizen like
you are.
Everybody else. And I sat there and I watched those hearings and I watched witnesses prove criminal violations. And then I watched the head of the department, I watched the Attorney General, who was a Republican at the time,
right,
step aside, and I watched the head of the FBI say, nothing to see here. We would have to prove she intended to do those things, and we just can't prove that.
Even though they admitted to smashing it with a hammer,
remember that's why Comey said, that it was nothing criminal, that Hillary hadn't committed any criminal violations because he would have to prove intent.
Right.
In other words, he would have to prove that when she smashed those phones and BleachBit that server, that she was knowingly doing that to destroy classified documents. But we can't prove that because we don't have the classified documents. And then, so that's the standard that we saw, in 2015. And then you fast forward to 2023, and we have a former president that's been indicted for opinions.
Right.
That he's saying. I haven't read the indictment. That was just the latest indictment. But I've read some analysis of it from people I trust, and basically, he's been indicted because of misinformation, for spreading misinformation. Now, that's just like who gets to define what misinformation is? And I can tell you from a prosecutor's standpoint, one person's misinformation is another person's truth. It's
called opinions.
It's opinions, and you're entitled to them, and they're protected.
We should be entitled to them.
You're even in. You can lie. It's not illegal to lie. Have we ever believed everything a politician said when they were on the campaign trail?
No.
Well, if that's the case, then every one of those politicians that get up there on the campaign trail and lie to get your vote,
right,
they're committing election interference.
You know, I never thought of it like that.
Country.
I never thought of it like that.
Because they're telling you something they know is not true to get you to vote for them or to not vote for their opponent under what's going on in today's standards.
Right.
That's election interference at least.
Wow, Brent.
You know, and Donald Trump telling people to basically to protest peacefully because you think the election was rigged. You know, that's now, you know, that's an insurrection.
Well, I mean, I watched 2,000 Mules, and I mean, I'm pretty convinced that it was rigged.
Now, contrast that with this. Donald Trump believes the election was rigged.
Right.
All those people that went to Washington on January 6th for the right reason.
Right.
I think there were a lot of people there that were there just to cause trouble.
You mean like the FBI that was in?
Maybe. You know, I mean, if you're going there just to protest, and you know, why are you wearing helmets and vests and disguising your identity if you're just there to protest the election?
Right, but a lot of
I think
people.
you can look at those videos and pick out the actual protesters from the instigators. But anyway,
Yeah.
those people believed what they were there protesting.
Oh yeah, I actually know somebody. I know somebody that went to January 6th.
Well, now we know that the whole Russiagate thing was a lie from the beginning, right?
Right.
Hillary and the Democratic Party created a lie and sold it to the American people and sold it to the media and sold it to Congress and sold it to the politicians, all in an effort to oust a lawfully elected president,
Right.
Donald Trump, and or to keep him from being elected again. To me, that's worse than somebody who actually believes what they're protesting than these people that knowingly made up something false. I mean, they're literally committing fraud to either overturn the election and get Trump out of office,
Right.
or to at least keep him from being able to run again.
Well, I tell you, remember I told you before we started that this goes fast, doesn't it? It goes a lot faster than you think it does.
Right, yeah.
So we got 5 minutes approximately.
You got a minute and a half.
Minute.
Oh, my watch is wrong. Okay, real quick, Sound of Freedom and what's going on with trafficking of children. What have you seen around here, and what can parents do to protect their children?
Wow. I don't know if I can talk about that in a minute and a half, but Sound of Freedom, sadly, what you saw in that movie does happen. It doesn't, what you saw in that movie, thankfully, doesn't happen on any large scale here. You don't have people here recruiting kids to audition just so they can kidnap a van full of kids. You know, I mean, our system, that you couldn't get away with that here.
Right.
What we have here are the consumers of child porn.
Right.
You know, and sadly, a lot of the people that are in Central America or wherever that are buying these children and raping those children, the reason they're doing it is to produce that pornography that's going to be viewed by the pedophiles in America.
Right.
You know, and America, I believe, is the largest consumer of
They
child
are.
pornography. I saw a fact today, there are more servers in America than anywhere else in the world sending that stuff out.
Right.
So we see those cases all the time. You know, as far as protecting your kids, the cases we see locally
Right.
are kids that are in the home with somebody that's a pedophile, and
Okay.
they're being abused, they're being raped, touched, whatever, by that person that's in the home. And fortunately, we catch those people and we have laws to put them in prison a lot of times, but not all the times.
Well, Brent, we've gone over thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you for all you do to help keep our community safe.
Well, thank you for having me, and I probably gave whoever's going to run against me next time plenty of ammo.
No, you haven't.
But you asked me a question, I'm going to, as Brent Cooper, American citizen, I'll give you my opinion.
Thank you, Brent.
Thank you.
There. Good to see you. TJ Jefferson, how are you over there? Good to see you here on this Wednesday.
It's good to be seen. Rich going to light this candle.
Light it up.
We had a no-hitter